हाँ जी, क्या
फ्राई तो दोनों चल रहा है, मैंने सुना है।
ओ हम लोगों के नहीं, हम लोगों से भागते हो।
च्यवनप्राश क्या लेते हो?
90
नहीं,
क्या होता है?
सोहा जी आप
यहाँ पे लेफ्ट में
मैडम यहाँ पर सोहा जी
यहाँ पे
मैम यहाँ
सारे मेरा फ्लैश।
सोहा जी
मैम थोड़ा करो। हाँ बस यार देखिए
मैम योर लेफ्ट साइड
हाथ पीछे
सेंटर, थोड़ा सा सेंटर प्लीज।
सोहा मैम यहाँ
ये भाई थोड़ा पीछे आओ ना, बहुत आगे।
मैम जिसमें सोहा मैम जिसमें
सोहा मैम
Sorry.
Excuse me. ओ भाई साहब, आ जाओ पीछे।
एक मिनट मैम,
सोहा जी वेट वेट।
मैम यहाँ देखिए।
सोहा जी यहाँ पे।
मैम यहाँ
one more here मैम here
Thank you.
यार मला मोबाईल पण काढायचा होता।
आज जाऊन पण आपण
बोलता ना भी ना।
Plastic soldiers.
Okay, perfect. A very, very warm welcome to all our friends here from the media. Super, super excited to welcome you all at this beautiful venue. I think today is a very special day. It's the 1st of March and we are kickstarting the International Women's Day month with the theme being Embrace Equity. And what better way to do it than sit with some amazing, wonderful women here who have in different ways inspired me as a woman, and I'm sure as you hear more from them today, it will be a completely different experience for all of you too. I'm going to be your host today and the moderator of this panel discussion. My name is Prasidha Menon. I head communications for Air India across India and Southeast Asia. Love traveling and love speaking with inspirational women. So super excited for today. Before we get on to introducing the panelists, all of whom you already know, I'm going to definitely set some house rules. Please do put your mobile phones on silent. Please do, after the session, meet us, engage with us so that this conversation is a lot more interactive and fruitful. The Wi-Fi password for the venue is Kathiawati 1434, if I've got that right. Yeah, it is 1434. And the user ID is KCH Art. So in case you're not finding network here, it's KCH Art. It's Kathiwada, 1434. That's KATHIWADA 1434, all caps. I'll repeat it one more time. The user ID is KCH Art, ART, and the password is KATHIWADA 1434, all caps. So yeah, I'm going to start with a quick introduction to our amazing panel. We have with us Soha Ali Khan, actor and author. I think you all know enough about her in terms of her acting career, but what I do want to share with all of you is the fact that she has been actively advocating and supporting education for girls. She's been working in the field of healthcare and better facilities for women, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from her around that. I think it's just very interesting to also follow her on Instagram and see wonderful stories with her family, her lovely daughter, and I think the role she's playing as a mommy, while of course setting very high standards for all of us women to stay healthy and to pursue our passions. We also have with us Lisa Mishra, again somebody you all know. I'm sure you have all, danced to some of her very, very famous numbers and also listened to some soothing ones while enjoying a cup of coffee or your choice of beverage. And she's of course a singer and also a songwriter who has definitely been breaking some stereotypes in the industry. I interestingly Googled this morning to check how many songwriters, women songwriters we have in India, and the number was disappointing to say the least. I'm so happy that she's doing something in this space, and she started at the age of 13, so we'll hear more from her on that. And then we have with us Kirti. Kirti is an entrepreneur and co-founder of Love, a brand which works in the fashion technology space. I think I knew Kirti more from her previous role at Okai, this interesting fashion brand that she was working with, and some really lovely clothes made by artisans. Extremely passionate about supporting women, creating more opportunities, and now I'm very curious to know that as a co-founder of Love, what are the kind of situations she's dealing with, so we'll speak more about that. And last but not the least, I have a member of our family, the Airbnb family. I have with us Kakuli Banerjee. She is the self-taught architect, founder of People for Pondicherry's Heritage. She's been regularly hosting a ton of single women who have, been to more than 20 listings, I think, on Airbnb. And she employs almost 90% of women as her staff and has been also involved in the rehabilitation of marginalized women in Rajasthan through a non-profit. So, a lot of interesting stories coming up. I'm excited to do these conversations. I hope you two are. In terms of the discussion today, we split it into approximately like 3 segments. We've talked a little bit about your journey, hear more from you on embracing equity and kind of pursuing inclusivity, which are also themes for this year's International Women's Day. And then because we are Airbnb and we love travel, we'd love to hear from you a little bit about your travel journeys and interesting experiences, tips, things that I'm sure everybody in the audience is going to benefit. So yeah, excited for that. I hope audience, you're all very, very excited. You can hear us well. And yeah, we will get started. Alright, so in terms of the first question, I'm going to come to you. So I think you've had a wonderful journey in the industry. I think it's been almost 20 years, 2004 debut from my research. So it's been a long journey. You also kind of forayed into OTT recently. So I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and, as a woman, what were the challenges you faced and what are the kind of changes you've observed over the years in terms of, the kind of roles women get or the kind of opportunities you get now?
Firstly, hi. It has been 20 years probably, yes. I think that cinema is a wonderful place and it has a profound influence on society. Cinema tends to reflect what one sees. It can also push the agenda a little bit. I feel like we're not doing that enough. We're not really pushing the status quo. We're giving people more or less what they're comfortable watching. There are a few exceptions, and more recently I've worked with people like Amazon. I've worked with Abundancia as a production firm, and they very actively support women. They in fact make it a policy to employ 50% women, behind the screens. And I think that when we were promoting the last series that I did, Hashash, I said, why do we need to say that this is a women show? Because aren't we alienating half the audience as a result? Shouldn't we just say it's a good show? And they said, we're not there yet. We still need to fight. We need to speak. I understand I personally come from a position of incredible privilege. There was no distinction made between me and my brother when it came to education, when it came to the things that we dreamed about and that we wanted to aspire to become. But I understand that that's also a fraction of certainly women in India. So I feel that we've come a long way, of course. I, for example, am very grateful for the fact that as a woman in her 40s, I'm employed. Because perhaps a generation ago, they wouldn't know where to put me. You're usually the heroine or you're the hero's mother. And then when you turn 40, they're like, why don't you just do something else for 10, 15 years, and then you can play the hero's mother. But now, as you can see, and I owe that a lot to, again, perhaps OTT, I can see myself being represented on screen. So I feel that we've come a long way. Again, we're seeing cinematographers, we're seeing lyricists, we're seeing people who are not typically in costume and makeup, which has usually been the women's domain in the past. My sound engineer was a woman in my last project, which was, you know, a first for me. I understand also that this just, for a lot of people, it's inconvenient to work with women when it comes to shooting and outdoors, because a woman will then, you'll have to get another hotel room for her because she can't share with the boys. You'll have to get different bathroom facilities. You have to make sure that she gets home safely when you're shooting at night. But if we normalize these things and if we really work together to make this a policy, then it won't be so inconvenient. When it's not just the odd woman on set, but they're making up half that number at least, then it won't be inconvenient and it will become the norm. And I think one of the best things is that when you employ women in positions of power as heads of department, they will then work with women and employ more women. And I see that change slowly coming. But again, I feel like we're just scratching the surface and we have a very long way to go. There continues to be a lot of glamorization of women, a lot of women, you know, especially when it comes to, you know, theaters, not really representing a more comprehensive perspective on what a woman does in terms of her screen time, whether it's ads, whether it's media, whether it's news. You know, a lot of the women that you see in news are sort of victims. You know, so we really need to change that perception. I think we're getting there, and I'm very, very positive about the future. And I think if we continue to meet like this and talk and even speak for women who don't have voices themselves, then we will get there.
Right. I mean, so agree with you because I feel like, you know, back in the day when we were sitting and thinking of putting this panel together, like one of my questions was why do we do this only around Women's Day? Like, you know, we should be celebrating Women every day. And when you also look at it from a different person, you realize that maybe for women like us here, you are right, you come from a certain privilege, you got some opportunities, and therefore we are where we are today. But for a lot of other women, it's like a reminder. It's a reminder to like live as a fullest, pursue your passions. And I think conversations like this act as that reminder. And I think towards the end of this panel, as we reach out to more people through our social or through our friends from the media, I think if we even able to influence one person or a certain number of people to think differently, I think that's going to be a big win for us. Thank you so much. That was very insightful and interesting to learn for us being people who just watch you from a distance and on screens. Please, I want to come to you. I think you also had a very interesting journey. You started at the age of 13. You've been in the US and then you moved here and then you had your big moment of fame and now you've become this huge social media star as well. There's just so much happening. But I'm sure it would not have been a journey which is as smooth as it looks on Instagram. So we'd just love to know a little bit from you on, how has the journey been for you and how has it influenced your creative music making process and just you as a person?
Yeah, I think a couple of different things. When I came in here to the industry, I didn't know anything. It happened at me because the internet chose me and I was given this massive opportunity to step outside of my bedroom and make music professionally. So because I didn't expect what was going to happen, I wasn't prepared and I wasn't given the devices to understand how the greater, male-led industry works in music. Because frankly, in terms of composition, lyrics, singing, all of your most powerful people in the room are always men. Record label heads, everybody in the room, engineers, PR, everyone in the mechanism is about 85, 90, if not more % male. So I wasn't prepared to see so few women in positions of power, and I didn't know who I could make an ally out of. But I was very lucky that the way I was brought into the industry was by women. So it's my luck that I was introduced to the industry by Ria and Sonam. And then it's again my luck that the people that ended up representing me, my agency, was female-led and entirely staffed by women, which was Matrix at the time. And so that gave me an insulation from what I feel like if I had come, and had to figure out agents and everything else, the business side of things myself, I would have run into a lot more trouble. Because I think the wonderful thing is that women will always help women, and we are great protectors of each other. So what I would not have been offered as insight independently, I got to have just from the inside being like, these are places to avoid, these are not the greatest people, they don't pay so well, this is a session that's wasted time, you know, put your efforts here, work with other women, meet other women that are composers and writers. So I think I was very lucky that my worldview in this industry was shaped by such powerful women, all at the top of their games individually. But yeah, it's an eye-opener when you come in here and you see people just, I mean, I've had to fight for song credits that fights I've lost for songs I've written that have had to have, you know, the male composer's name listed, and when I said I wrote half the song, I've been met with, well, he's the senior composer, so he won't share the credit. Either you can choose to give up the song and not have it released and we'll replace your voice. I was like, well, then you can't replace my composition. Like, well, we'll just rewrite the portion that you did and hand it all entirely over to him. I was like, you're willing to sacrifice good work at the cost of just naming a woman who was young and in the room and capable enough to be a co-writer. So it is, I mean, like, you run into these moments that you're like, this is just so deeply insulting, but is it worth losing the opportunity? And sometimes you do cave into that because you contextualize it within the greater part of your career, and you say, okay, you know, swallow your ego. Although it's really not swallowing your ego, it's just giving into a system that's built against us. And then sometimes you draw a hard line and you make a lot of enemies, and I kid you not, every time I've drawn this line, 3 years later, everybody else catches up. Go, oh, that guy sucks to work with. I was like, really? But you wouldn't? So I was, great, thank you for ignoring what I said. And I'm glad you got to figure it out on your own several years later. But it is like that. I think, you know, it's hard to be in a room full of men all the time. Most of our meetings, you know, it's that typical like board meeting that's, you know, a 12, 16 seater, and there's 2 women or just me in the room. And you get drowned out and you have your opinion, you know, squashed a lot of times. You just have to, you know, go for it, make some enemies, and talk the talk and walk the walk, and hope it all falls into place.
Yeah. And I know it can be extremely difficult. I mean, in my journey, I've been in these meeting rooms full of men, and sometimes when you're bringing in a perspective, which is, yes,
as a student, and I was in ignorance of the proximity to Europe again. I was friends with somebody called Tom Pravda, who would just travel, and as an Indian, instead of coming all the way back home, I would just stay with friends over spring break and over the winter break and just come back for the summer. And once we went into Morocco, into the Sahara Desert, and 3 days and 3 nights we spent. We went on camels, 3 of us, Alice and Tom and me. We went on a bus and we went to the last possible place. It was a sort of sandy hut at the edge of the desert. And we stayed the night there with Muhammad, who was our guide. And they were seasoned travelers, Tom and Alice, so they had sleeping bags. I didn't have a sleeping bag. So I just slept on the floor, and there was no electricity. So when the candle went out, just before the candle went out, I looked at the walls, and it was like I thought the walls were moving. And then I realized they were covered in insects. And then the light went out, and I was like, oh no! And it was like a horror movie. And then plop, plop, they started to fall off the ceiling. Was I telling you my fun experience? Right? So let me start this one. I was covered in bites, but of course because it was so dry, they festered many weeks later when I went back to Spain. Then we went into the desert on 3 camels. Riding a camel is not easy, especially if you have small legs like me, and my camel had a very big hump. So I literally got friction burns on my bum. It was not fun. The second day I spent walking through the Sahara Desert, which is also very difficult. We ran out of water on the 3rd day. It was an experience, but what was the most that I remember about it was the stars and lying there at night under these stars and just thinking this is just the experience of being without water. When we got to Marrakesh to have like the first soft drink that we had was like the best soft drink I've ever had, just because we've been deprived of things for so long. And testing your limits. And so I remember that. I remember hitchhiking to Paris, and again with Tom Proctor. I don't think I would have done this without a travel buddy who pushes you. I think Paris for me, a place that I've been to so many times in different stages of my life. One as a child, of parents who like to do these sort of hotel itinerary things, and you go to, you know, Euro Disney and you go to see the Louvre and all of that, and it's sort of sanitized and comfortable. And then you go as a student, where we went walking all over. We actually hitchhiked to Paris. We spent the night in a train station outside of Calais in sub-zero temperatures, and then we got to Paris and walked the city. And that was lovely, and in fact I walked the Champs-Élysées blindfolded, just to get, this was Tom's idea again, saying it's a trust-building exercise. And then he was blindfolded and I had to guide him, and I realized actually during that walk how I was slowly taking the reins from him and becoming in control of my journey. And then I went back as an actor to work on a film that never released. But it was great fun to shoot there, and we were shooting in front of the Eiffel Tower, and I was watching a lot of people looking at us as opposed to, you know, like this wonder of the world, and thinking how strange that is. And then I went back with my now husband, and he proposed to me under the Eiffel Tower. So we have this log. I want to take my daughter there, and I think, you know, when we were talking, and I was looking at the briefing about what is the next trend, it's certainly like Ina and I went on a mother-daughter holiday just a couple of months ago, and that was incredibly memorable for me. You know, we went to Goa and we spent 3 days, just her and me, and we really, really bonded. And we just spent all day on the beach, and, you know, then in the pool, and then eating lots of things and just conversing. And, you know, she stayed up late, and it was just fun. But I think that is something that I definitely want to do more of. So in my future holidays, I see her and me doing mother-daughter trips, and definitely having spent the last 5 years losing my identity to motherhood. I want to apologize to my friends, say I'm still there for them. Yeah, say, listen, if you're still there and interested, I would like to go on some friend holidays and, you know, and just find my friends again.
Yeah. So are you also coming up with another book, which is going to be your holiday journeys? Given that
Well, there was a lovely, I mean, there was a big chapter of my book that was devoted to travel, because it's been such an important part of my life. And I do love coming home as well, and I am a creature of habit, and I do like consistency. But I just feel like life is short, and there's so much to see and so much to learn from. And I definitely have done the hotels a lot, and I've enjoyed hotel life as well. But for me, I think when it comes to travel, it is Airbnb, because you feel not like an outsider when you go to a city. You know, you really get a very unique, privileged sort of perspective on living as an insider in a city, living in someone's home, and all the perks and challenges that come with that as well. But it's a very unique experience. So that's the future.
Awesome. That again makes me smile. I think my two takeaways, and one is of course what Soha said towards the end, to be an Airbnb traveler, but most importantly, find Tom in your life. you need to do fun stuff like walking blindside.
And I've never ever done a solo holiday. Ever.
Oh wow.
I know, I've heard a lot about it, and I have a lot of girlfriends who tell me that, you know, how can you not have done it? Have you? Yeah. I'm a little scared, really. I'm scared, but I think that is my challenge as well for the future, because I definitely need some solo time.
Wow. We're going to catch up with you right after this and start planning
So
on the solo trip for you. On it.
Tell me where to go by myself,
Absolutely.
and then find me if I get lost.
Absolutely. I think good segue, Lisa. I know you were saying you have done some solo traveling. I also know that, you know, Airbnb has spoken a lot about living and working anywhere, and you did spend some time in Karjat and working there, so we'd love to hear about that.
Where do I begin? I think Sahiba knows this, and I was like, how am I going to fill this time? So the evening of the first day, which was like maybe 3 or 4 hours, we did a beer and walking tour, which was fantastic, with just a group of strangers. The morning I woke up and I did a historic Hanoi French Quarter tour, and through a local's perspective, I mean, I'm gonna go do that. And especially in places like Vietnam, which have such a bloody and, you know, rich history. There's just so much learning that's done in these tours, and you imbibe so much information and history when you go on these experiences. So that's one. But for my partnerships with Airbnb, unintentionally, and it was completely spur of the moment thing. We hadn't planned on doing this, but my band was with me, and I wanted to treat everybody to just three.
Thank you.
This camera, please.
अरे भाई
चले हो गया डाले मैं डाले बहुत सारे
फोटो चेंज बात
या रेडी
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Please give me. सोहा मैम एक मिनट
कहाँ देखूँ मैं?
वुमेन इंटरनेशनल डे है वुमेन इंटरनेशनल डे है दिस पूरा वीक वी आर गोइंग टू डू सम और द अदर सेगमेंट आज भी कुछ अनोखा हमने देखने मिला है जहाँ पे बहुत सी बातें हुई कहीं ट्रिप की बात हुई है तो कहीं लाइफ के अप डाउन्स की बात हुई है क्या कुछ कहना चाहोगे उन सभी वुमेन्स के लिए देयर आर मेनी वुमेन स्टिल वी कैन सी देयर आर मेनी प्रॉब्लम्स which are going through but still women they are putting their 100%.
आई थिंक वुमेंस डे पे मैं यही कहना चाहती हूँ कि दे आर डिफरेंट. इंडिया इज़ अ बिग कंट्री. नॉट एवरीबडी इन इंडिया इज़ इन द 21st सेंचुरी. और मैं अपने आप को बहुत ही प्रिविलेज्ड मानती हूँ कि मेरी जो लाइफ है, मेरे जो ड्रीम्स हैं, सपने थे, वो सब के पीछे मेरे माँ बाप ने पूरा अपना सपोर्ट दिया. मुझे पता है कि काफ़ी लड़कियों के साथ ऐसा नहीं होता है. जहाँ तक शिक्षा की बात होती है, जहाँ तक शादी की बात होती है, जहाँ तक माँ बनने की बात होती है, उनका कोई उनका सुनता ही नहीं है, उनकी आवाज़ ही नहीं होती है. तो टू टॉक अबाउट दीज इश्यूज़ और जहाँ तक एज एन एक्टर to talk about cinema and to talk about digital content or to talk about the representation of women on screen, in front of the screen, behind the screens, वो situation कैसा है. मैं मानती हूँ कि हम काफ़ी आगे आ चुके हैं and especially as a woman in her 40s अभी बहुत सारे roles हैं actors के लिए. और आप देख चुके होंगे actors in their 40s are being represented on screen, actors in their 50s and their 60s. और मैं अपनी माँ की बात करूँ तो गुलमोहर आने वाली है डिज़नी हॉटस्टार पे और वो तो अपनी लेट 70s में है. And it's such a fantastic role for her. So things are changing behind the scenes. पहले तो सिर्फ लड़कियों को आप सिनेमा में कॉस्ट्यूम डिपार्टमेंट में हेयर ड्रेसर की तरह देखती थी, लेकिन अभी सिनेमाटोग्राफर्स, DOPs, साउंड डिपार्टमेंट में, एडिटिंग में, lyricists, singer-songwriters, there are lots of different roles for women. But as I said, we're just scratching the surface and we have a long way to go. बस मैं सबसे पहले थैंक्स कहना चाहती हूँ Airbnb को, क्योंकि इनका इनिशिएटिव था और मुझे बहुत कुछ सीखने को भी मिला. एज Airbnb क्या वो करते हैं फॉर वुमेन्स एम्पावरमेंट, और मुझे ये भी सीखने को मिला कि बहुत जो सारे मैक्सिमम जो होस्ट्स हैं इंडिया में वो वुमेन हैं और उनको एक इनकम अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है जो वो अपने घर, अपने प्रॉपर्टीज़ को Airbnb पे डालते हैं. then they get revenue from that and they tie up with lots of women also, women artisans, whether it's in Pondicherry like stories we were hearing or Karjat, you know, women who tie up with experiences through Airbnb and उनको भी फिर एक economic independence का opportunity मिलता है. So these are one of the many ways that we're trying to move forward in India and trying to address things like gender equity.
Being a mother, what you would like to say to all the other mothers? Still we can see this is the time where we can see the women are so busy, so that they are not able to spend that much of time where the children need all such times. And we see always you taking an initiative, whether it's any festival, whether it's any vacations, we always see on you on the social media spending time with your child. So what you like to say?
I am very lucky that I live a life that gives me time, that I have a career where I can choose the things that I want to do, that I chose to have a daughter, of course, later in life, but that I can now devote a lot of my time to her, towards her education, towards her upbringing. क्योंकि मैं मानती हूँ कि एक माँ बनना, एक parent बनना, एक responsibility है. आप actually एक इंसान को, एक शख्स को shape करके आप society में भेज रहे हैं, तो वो किस किस्म का इंसान बनेगा, वो आपके हाथों में भी है. Of course, there are other influences as well. So I think taking out time as a parent is important, but also to depend on other people, क्योंकि आप अकेले ये काम नहीं कर सकते हैं. और जितना आप अपने friends पे, अपने family पे, अपने mother-in-law, अपनी mother, nanny, caretakers पे depend करते हैं और delegate करते हैं, वो अच्छा ही होगा. क्योंकि बहुत सारी माँ होते हैं जो सब कुछ खुद करना चाहते हैं, और वो बहुत मुश्किल होता है. And it's also probably not very healthy.
One last question, a best moment with your mom which you spent with, and you remember that?
It's hard to choose one moment with your mother, but recently, अभी हाल ही में ही हम दोनों ने साथ में गुलमोहर देखी, जो उनकी फिल्म है जो आ रही है, जैसे मैंने कहा था, and to see her enjoying watching herself on screen after 12 years, and for me to be so proud of her, because she's done really a remarkable job in that. Her performance is very solid, so I feel very proud of her, and you know, to see herself watching herself on screen and feeling happy about that was something very special.
Are you going to give any surprises to all the viewers very soon, just like a new project, anything, something new?
Well, there is a film that I've done after some time. I've done 2 shows in the recent past, but there's a movie which has been produced by Abhidanshya, and it's called Chori 2, with Nusrat, who was in Chori 1, of course, and I'm playing the antagonist for the first time in a horror, which is something that I haven't done before. So I am looking forward to that, and hopefully it'll release in cinemas in this year. It's fun.
गुलमोहर मूवी देखा, कल स्क्रीनिंग था उसका.
हाँ जी, आपने देखी? रोए आप? रोए आप? मैं बहुत रोई.
मैं भी गया था, देखा, बहुत ही प्यारी मूवी थी. और मैं जानना चाहूँगा आपकी भी कुछ वेब सीरीज वगैरह देखने को मिलेगी?
अभी तो मैंने उसका रिस्पॉन्स दिया, आप सुन नहीं रहे हो. हाँ, छोरी 2 एक फिल्म आ रही है. अभी कैसे आएगी, कहाँ पे आएगी, वो प्रोड्यूसर्स डिसाइड करेंगे, लेकिन एक बहुत ही बेहतरीन फिल्म है. पार्ट 2 है, छोरी 1, नाउ दिस इज़ छोरी 2, और इसमें भी एक बहुत ही वुमेन्स एम्पावरमेंट और एक मैसेज तो है, बट बियॉन्ड द मैसेज इट्स जस्ट, आई थिंक फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम आई हैव बीन पार्ट ऑफ एन एक्चुअल जेन्युइन क्लासिक हॉरर फिल्म, जहाँ पे होपफुली वी होप टू स्केयर यू as well as maybe teach you something also, but definitely to scare you.
Lastly, Women Day wish to all the women.
A very happy Women's Day to everyone out there, man and woman. I think that we're all in this together. And my message is to men that don't feel threatened by women. You know, that we can also try and fight for our dreams without bringing men down. You know, we're working together in this initiative, and I know that, as I said, I come from a place of huge privilege, but I would like to speak for a lot of women who don't have a voice, and to say that we definitely need to work towards gender equity, whether it comes to education, especially for young girls, whether it comes to hygiene and sanitary conditions, whether it comes to gender parity in the workplace, and equal employment, things like that. We have a long way to go. Thank you. Thank you.
All of that put together, it was the most successful endeavors, I think, for me. I was like, that was the beginning. And I love meeting people. It was wonderful. I had all my breakfast with all my guests. And I realized that's all it takes. You just create a place with passion and with that kind of involvement, and you meet your guests, you spend time with them. It's bound to be successful. And it's been a great journey after that since then.
So happy to hear that. I'm trying to contain my smile because I know when Bright Chesky started, it was all about meaningful connections, and it's just so amazing to see that come alive in such beautiful ways. Very, very, very happy to hear that. I think we'll move to the next segment of our panel and talk a little bit about embracing equity. And Lisa, I want to start with you and, you know, understand a little from you in terms of potentially the kind of changes you would want to see in the music industry to really give women the opportunity to do far better. I know you spoke about some pieces in terms of all the biases, so would love to know a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think just a lot of it has to be a very dynamic mental shift in starting to see women as legitimate artists. It's a lot of the same difficulty that actresses have in the industry, if they want to work as writers, if they want to work as directors, if they want to work as producers. It takes a long time, I think, for society to make that mental shift of legitimizing women in entertainment as beyond performers. So it's the same thing in the music industry. I think for so long women have been considered just singers. And there's so much more than that. Now, we can't just stand on a stage and sing at a microphone. You have to be full, well-rounded performers. You have to be dancers. You have to be songwriters. Legitimizing our own art with our own words, I think, is it's now become the most important thing for all music artists, male or female. So it's really mostly just a mental thing. I think we have to start training our brain to, like, when a woman walks into a label office, we should see them as an artist and not a singer. And it's just very far away from happening right now. I think we see a beautiful voice and we see a marketable, packageable woman, and we say, okay, that's done. But God forbid she asks for, the utility facilities to write her own music. Can I get in a room with a couple of different producers and sit and make an album? Like, well, I don't know if that's for you yet. Why don't we put a couple of male songwriters? Like, well, how are they going to get in my perspective of telling my story as a woman and translate that into words and make it into a song? So I think first step is just to mentally really just cleanse our minds of this idea that men are the end-all be-all artists, that women are now we're just so much further beyond being singers. And we're bona fide performers and artists. So that's the first step. And I think the second thing, which is, in women like me and a lot of my peers I see doing this as well, it'll take us to be the woman at the table who bring in other women to the table. So it's going to be a generational thing that happens, because I think mine is the first generation in which I'm starting to see label offices and production offices being staffed by more and more women, and in positions of power. So one is a mentality shift, and two is employing more women in these offices and on the back end, because for every single performer there's a team of 35 people behind them in the offices making it all happen. And the more staffed with women they are, especially for women artists, the better, because then their perspective is given legitimacy, then they're getting resources as well as the men. And we're so far away in the music industry from achieving any sort of pay parity. That's like a dream if we even get close to that. But I firmly believe it unfortunately almost always has to begin with women helping each other. And then inviting, the invitation's always there, but it will take some time, I think, before men see that as well. I'd really love to challenge them to a little faster would be great.
That's so true. And do you see a difference in the way things have been in India versus your time in the US? Or do you think it's more like a situation globally pretty much at par?
I think the West has just had a lot more time to develop its music industry. Ours is still a very nascent industry beyond playback, because we've been a playback-led industry, male and female, for so long, and the categories have always been separate. There's a composer, there's a songwriter, and there's a singer. So now we're looking at a really big shift into all three being just one person, which the West started doing about 40 years ago. They also started this way. So it just comes in waves, I think. So it will change, it's bound to change, it has to, but I think we're about a decade before we get to where they are. And yeah, I think that's what it'll take.
Yeah. More power to women like you who've started change. And I think that's a really good segue to my question to Katie. I think for you, from the opportunities for women, because if I were to look at your journey as an outsider and somebody who's really been inspired by it, I think there's a lot that you've also kind of faced. I'm sure comparisons, ups and downs, very, very interesting kind of moments in life which were spoken about and discussed in various forms, and it's not always been easy. So we'd just love to hear a little bit more from you on that.
Okay, what's the question? Specifically.
Two questions. I'd love to know a little bit about your journey and in terms of, how have you kind of dealt with some of the challenges, whether it's comparisons or ups and downs. And I think what really inspired you to therefore, is there a connection, and then what inspired you to work in this space for girls' education and more opportunities for women?
So I'd say, when it comes to, firstly, the easy one, my decision to work in cinema. This is my third profession. I was a banker before this. I worked in an NGO. In fact, my very first job was with the UN Development Fund for Women in Delhi. I always thought of myself, I studied history and international relations. I wanted to give back. I understood that I came from a position of great privilege in a country like India. And I had ambition, and I wanted to live a good life. And I wanted to spend a lot of money on travel. That was also a huge incentive. But I just felt that when you're surrounded by glaring inequity, how can you not want to make other people's lives better if you can? And if it's really not difficult for you. I know so many people who give so much more of themselves. So, whether it came to supporting a cause financially, giving your time, working for Teach for India, we have the Vidodi Trust as well, and we work with acid attack victims. We've donated our eyes. So wherever you can give back to society, I feel like one should. And that was something just that we learned as children. In terms of my decision then to move on from the corporate field to acting, it was because I enjoyed theatre, and monetarily it was very attractive also. And financial independence, to go back to that, is key. It doesn't matter whether you come from wealth or you come from privilege. You need to earn your own money to be able to be empowered to make your own decisions. And I was very clear that I wanted to make certain decisions that other people may not agree with. And the only way I can do that is that I don't have to defer or ask for help. My parents were very supportive, but they respected my decisions. They said, when you're 18, we're investing heavily in your education, so that when you turn a certain age, you go out there and you make your decisions. We're there to guide you, but you live your life. And I did. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I learned from them, and I've lived my own life and made my own decisions. So working in cinema was something that I wanted to do. I knew that it would open me up to a lot of public criticism. I'd always been an A-grade student. I was used to doing well. I did perhaps think that this was going to be easier than it was. My first report card was not good at all. But I am also somebody who has always been quite thick-skinned. I can take criticism. It doesn't shake me to my core. I deal with a lot of criticism on a daily basis, personally, from people that I know, from people who love me, and from people who are strangers on Instagram and other venues. And I really feel like I absorb what is constructive, and I just deflect what is not. And I don't know where that comes from. I think it comes from a third child perspective. I think it comes from a lot of security from, we tend to go back to my childhoods. I think I had a very secure childhood. I think I saw my father weather a lot of setbacks in his life, from losing his eye at the age of 21, and going on to obviously do very well in his career. A lot of people from the outside think it must be easy to come from privilege, but I saw him lose a lot as well in his life, and he always took it in his stride. I think in terms of character, that was a huge inspiration for me. That things like money and celebrity come and go, but you have to be made of stronger stuff to weather all the different things. Like nobody knew COVID was going to come, lockdown was going to come. Of course, it has destroyed people in ways that it was just an inconvenience for us, perhaps. But how you fare in situations like that, I think those are the most important things. Being a student of history also, I really see how minute and minuscule we all are in the face of time. And that brings me back to travel again. Only when you travel, only when you go outside of your comfort zone, even if you think that you're the biggest star in Mumbai, and you go somewhere and you stand in front of the Grand Canyon, and you just should feel tiny and insignificant in the face of nature. And when you allow yourself to feel that, insignificant and tiny, I think that gives you a huge amount of perspective on life, such that when you come back to your home in your city and whatever you're doing in life, that should change your attitude to things around you. So again, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I just feel like travel, gives you perspective. And when you come back, if you can give of yourself and try and impact the world around you, like you said, even if it's one person who you change, I think when you become a parent, that one person becomes your child, you know, and you really see the return on your investment, the time you spend. You know, my child is now 5, and we have conversations every day where I can see other influences in her life and why I need to sort of, I don't want to use the word brainwash, but correct her a little bit, you know, according to what I think is right. And those daily conversations are so important in terms of shaping and sending out an individual into the world. You know, we can do a lot of damage as well as parents. So again, I don't know if I've answered your question, but next question.
No, you have, and you have not only answered my question, and there was a huge round of applause for that part. Let's give a huge round of applause for that part. So I think that's it takes a lot. It takes a lot to be able to bring in that relatability, and especially in a world like yours, you know, where you did always have that attention from the external world. I'm sure that must have been really hard, and I do want to come to you, Kakuli, because on the absolute other end of the equation, you work with a lot of marginalized women, and I hate to use that word, but you do work with a lot of women.
It's when I say marginalized women that I work with in Rajasthan, they were actually women who
Co-founder of a fashion technology brand, woman, somebody who's done so well with Okai. How has the journey been for you? Like, what are the? I'm sure you know some of the things that we're talking about in terms of challenges are things you must have seen in some form or the other. Maybe when speaking with an investor, for example. So we'd just love to know a little bit from you on how that journey's been.
So, like all of us, I also come from a space where our parents didn't raise us any different. But along the line, we did experience certain biases, for sure. I think while building Okai, which was the last 6 years, I was working in villages with rural women, and I started to notice that when you ensure that the woman in the house makes money, she goes and spends it on her son and the daughter equally. So before Okai, they were only sending their sons to tuitions, and after they started making their own money through embroidery, they started sending the daughters to tuitions as well. So I think that made me realize that money is a very big, sort of, it's life-changing for a woman in all aspects. Even a modern woman in Bombay who's not making her own money has to be submissive to many other demands around her. But if she's making her own money, she can have her own say, right? So I think 6 years ago we were working with about 350 women. Last year we were working with 27,000 women across the country. Scales that are unimaginable, and I think we garnered a lot of support from women customers who were coming and buying these garments. While building Okai, I also realized that women customers had over 100 garments from us. They moved from XL to XS or XS to M, and they had all these wardrobes, all these garments in their wardrobe, which were not utilized. And I think that waste generated by the fashion industry is massive, and we're all tapping into the same fast fashion, and we're kind of feeding the same business all the time, right? And we need to do something about it. So Relove came in as an output of that. Relove is basically a tech solution that fashion brands can embrace. You go to a website, you do add to cart and buy something. With Relove, you can click on the resell button on a brand's own website and check out. I built this company in the last 1 year. It's a fashion tech company. 50 customers. I fundraised during the middle of the year, and I did all of that pregnant. I was sick half the time. It was horrible. I didn't tell anyone I was pregnant because I was afraid that people are going to be like, hey, why should I give all of this money to this company CEO? I didn't tell anyone because I thought I wouldn't be invited to conferences, panels. And I thought that I didn't want that on my head. And now that the baby's out, I still haven't kind of like declared it, you know, that now I'm a mother, because people would assume that I have to.
I think now you have.
Yeah, now I have, right? And to tell you the truth, I think 1 hour before going into the OT, I was still doing a brand pitch. And the Monday after giving birth, I was back at work, right? And now it's been 2 months, and I'm right here. So I think it's possible for a woman to actually go beyond the expectation that society has set. I know that in many cases women are supposed to stay indoors for 40 days after giving birth in a single room. I think that's not even applicable, because modern science and surgeries are very different. I was walking the next day. So I think that you choose your path. I think that for many other women it would be tough, and then that's okay too, if it's tough for you. But if it's not, then that's okay too. So I guess like the journey of building a company and a successful company in this state has really kind of taught me a lot. And I feel like you can trust other women with jobs a lot more now, because I think I did it that way. And I understand that all they need is flexibility, which corporate India, it's tough to get, right? It's very tough to get that in a very corporate setting. Because you check in at 9, you're leaving at 7. If you're not there, you're missing for half an hour. What are you up to even? But I think with flexibility, with work from home, for the last 2 months I've been breastfeeding, and my call starts here. And somewhere here I'm on a very professional call, and I'm wearing a shirt and a blazer, and this baby's hanging right here. So yeah, that's my story. Thank you.
Very interesting, very interesting. And I love the fact that, you know, you've been so vulnerable and so open to sharing the kind of inhibitions you had about, you know, talking to the world about your baby. And I mean, I'm not a mother yet, but I feel like these would be thoughts that would come, where you don't want somebody to perceive that, oh, she has additional responsibilities, like how she's going to take care. I remember back in the day I used to work with this agency, and somebody asked me that, oh, we're looking at our resource planning, and are you planning to get married? Like, is there going to be anything? And maybe the gentleman was talking just in terms of potential vacation leaves, but the way the question was put forward, it was like, okay, what is this guy asking? So I think that sensitivity across the board, whether it's with people you work with or for yourself to feel confident enough to take those decisions, it's hard, I mean, to say the least. And yeah, I think some corporates are changing. I want to give a shout out to Airbnb. We will work from anywhere. We have flexible work culture, and yeah, it's different. It's different. And yeah, who else would talk a little bit more about Airbnb? But Kamali, she's been a host with us for a very long time and has more than 20 listings. So I'd just love to know your story in terms of, you know, how you started hosting, and you do host a lot of women travelers, and, you know, solo travel trends really picking up. So, you know, your journey and observations.
Hi. So to talk about my journey a little bit, I think I need to, how I got to Airbnb, I need to give you a little bit more background, because I come from a generation where I didn't have too many opportunities. My parents actually thought that, you know, this is the normal thing would be to just get married and settle down and have children. And they did get me married, of course. And it took me a little while to figure out that I wasn't cut out for that. It wasn't what I really wanted. I needed to do much more. So it was only at the age of 30 that I started living my life. I went to study design at NIFT Delhi. Then I did my fashion design studies from there. I did my master's in fashion and textiles from England. And then I came back and worked. My first job was with J.J. Valaya. I worked with him. And then I went into a farm in Rajasthan, not far from Patani, in an organic farm, and I lived there and I became a farmer. I loved it because to me being close to earth and nature was very meaningful. I really enjoyed that part. Now while I was in Rajasthan, I was inspired by two women, very significant, who played a role and who still play a role in my life. One was a lady called Shumita Ghosh. She is the founder of the Urmul Trust. And there was another lady called Kavita Srivastav. She is the People Union civil liberties lawyer. She rescues women. So it's because of these two ladies that I actually got into this whole thing about rehabilitating marginalized women in Rajasthan, and we got this group of women who came to stay with me on the farm, and the only thing I knew was clothing at that point and a bit of farming, of course. So we started living and working out of there. We created a brand, an ethical clothing brand for living on the farm. And in 2008, in one of the shows in Paris, we were given out the most ethical social brand of clothing from India award, which was a good recognition. But then I didn't know where to go from there, because it was more about giving those women a life so that they could be on their own, to live their life on their own. And slowly, one by one, each one of them started getting into I mean, a lot of them wanted to get married, so they got married, or they found a suitable job. And it was at that point that I wanted to move on to something beyond that, and I came to Pondicherry. And once in Pondicherry, I fell in love with the architecture, the Franco-Tamil architecture of Pondicherry. And that is how my journey into restoration of old houses began. The designer in me now suddenly wanted to rebuild these houses. So I gave my 100% to that, and we started with the first building that we restored was in 2004. We started doing that, and then in 2015 it was time for me to do the second one, and that is when I started working with a woman contractor. And that was a very big challenge, because this young girl, she really wanted to learn heritage construction, I mean reconstruction. So it was a good team. We had lots of fun doing it, and at this point of time, I think we can say that we are a team in terms of restoration of old properties in Pondicherry. And then in 2014, we started People for Pondicherry's Heritage Movement, because we wanted Pondicherry to become, retain its, not just its built architectural heritage, but also in every other aspect, because it's a very interesting kind of a global, because of Auroville, it has a very interesting global cultural mix. So we thought we really needed to showcase this in a better way. So that's how we started, and this year, right now, the 9th Heritage Festival is going on at the moment. And I think we've been kind of successful in creating that kind of desire in the people to hold on to something beautiful which is there from our past. So that is what my journey has been. Now, where did Airbnb come in all this? Is once I restored the first property, obviously what would I do? I mean, it was my home, I lived there, and I needed to open it up to guests, and that's when I went to Airbnb, because this was in 2013. And for me, it was a platform where I felt so safe, because as a single woman, to be able to host people without being apprehensive or nervous about it, the fact that I could review them as well they could